Wanted to talk about some tried and true ways to build your soil on your food plots. One of the ways, and we'll just dive right into this, is we're looking at constant crop rotations. Something different than a farmer would do. I'm going to talk about that following farming practices is always a good practice. Farmers, unlike food plotters, do this for a living. They do it to make money. Food plotters are in the red before we even begin. So farmers practice techniques that actually put money in their pockets and food on the table. That's completely different than what we're doing. So we'll talk about that. But one thing that goes against farming is we do things that take money out of our pockets. And what I mean by that, and they could be good practices, but wouldn't be economically viable for food plotting. Constant crop rotations is what I'm talking about. So going back into 99, 2000, 2001, I was working on my soil in the UP of Michigan. And to be honest, those initial soil tests, they were high 4s for pH, low 5s. And it was going to take a lot to build the soil. Took tons and tons of lime, over 4 tons per acre. And the initial fertilizer recommendations were prohibitive. I could not afford them. They were over 600 pounds per acre. What I found with, and I worked with Jim Islip, soil extension agent out of Elger County. He worked for the UP, making recommendations on soil. And he told me I needed frequent crop rotations, and I took that to heart. And he told me that for the past 100 years, or for decades and decades, farmers have used rye and buckwheat as soil builders, constant rotations. And so I looked at that, and that's what we've always used, is these constant rotations. But we're taking that a step further. And what we've done for many years is I've used rye and incorporated rye into my plantings. Well, I also use buckwheat during the summertime, and then we have our fall crop. So we're using those constant rotations to introduce not just organic matter. Organic matter, switchgrass, that switchgrass right there is organic matter. But you know, if I tilled that into the soil, that would take years to break down in the soil. No different than this corn right here. This corn on the ground that we had from last year, it's going to take years to break down in the soil. It takes nutrients to do so. Just because you have organic matter. One of the worst things, you look at some of the soil builders that have high volumes of sorghum in. That's really bad. It's not fine organic matter, so it takes years to break down. No different than putting a bunch of sticks on your soil. So we want constant rotations that help build and introduce fine organic matter into the soil. Fine organic matter is the root system. Fine organic matter is young rye, not old rye. Fine organic matter is tillage radish, is buckwheat leaves and stems. The root systems of all these plants are fine organic matter. So a lot different than, say, a sunflower seed. That's not fine organic, or a sunflower plant. That's not fine organic matter. Sorghum, corn, lots of rye. When you let it get 5-6 feet tall, that takes years to break down. So we're focused on those constant rotations. So what we're doing, you can see this is an area where last year we had our fall power greens where we introduced rye in September. The reason is because we want this young rye growing in the spring. That's not that great of deer food. Deer like hitting it right now, but as soon as green hits the woods, they're not hitting it. We're doing this specifically to hold the soil, help it avoid erosion. You can see this whole food plot right here, and almost all of ours in Minnesota, all of ours in Wisconsin, they're all tipped in. So they're all leaning towards the woods or towards our draws, and there's always that constant risk of erosion. These fields out here, for the last 150 years that they've been farming, they've lost approximately 5 feet of soil because of constant plowing, disking. You know, we're down to a foot of soil or less now. They say in the next 50 years, if they continue the same practices, there won't be topsoil out in these fields. So you'd think you're working this topsoil and you're going over it over again, and you're incorporating 12 inches or 10 inches into that topsoil, it'd be a good thing. It's actually a very bad thing because the plant grows in that top 1 inch. So what we're trying to do is constant rotations without tilling. And the first one is this rye. We actually go into where our corn areas were last year and we plant rye. And so we have rye growing on this entire food plot, and we do on all our food plots right now because we want to limit erosion in the spring. We don't want to ever till or disc this up. We've had corn growing in 12 locations on our property from tilling, chisel plowing, then planting, and then 3 to 4 inches of rain, and then we have trenches a foot deep or more coming onto our land from the farm fields, and that's where that soil's coming from. We don't want that to happen, so we have this rye here, And then we want that rye to be a soil builder with fine organic matter. So the fine organic matter is coming in with this rye, and we're getting that rotation. Plus, what's the beauty of rye? It limits weed growth. So rye has a natural chemical property that fights off weeds when they're coming in. So this rye, we don't want it to go to 5-6 feet though. And I always encourage clients, encourage you online, we mow it to kill it at 12-15 inches tall. Don't let it get to 18 inches, or spray it and kill it. What we really like to do is, this is our first soil builder for the year on all our plots. The second one is buckwheat. So we're introducing that buckwheat, fine organic matter, huge root system. The leaf structure, branch structure is a smother crop, so it smothers out weeds. It also keeps a greenhouse effect down in the soil, so it maintains moisture levels in the soil. And again, it avoids erosion. So we're fighting it by putting more nutrients in, fighting erosion, we're fighting our weeds, and then we're spraying one time in between when we introduce the buckwheat into the rye. We're not waiting until the rye is a certain height so we can crimp it, because the timing of crimping most crops for introducing other crops behind it is not appropriate for quality crops. It's like forcing, well, I'm gonna use a crimper, because you see that online or see someone using that. Well, I'm gonna use a crimper and then I need to put this in. No, we wanna dictate what's the best seed to plant, and we wanna tailor our planting methods to fit that seed for what we need for either deer traction or building the soil. So we're introducing rye, we're terminating the rye, and like I said, we're not disking till or anything, we're terminating the rye. That root structure is down there, it helps lift, it helps avoid compaction, builds that soil. And then we're introducing the buckwheat. When we do that, we're just simply broadcasting on the soil within the dead rye. We don't have a thatch layer of rye. That rye will not be like a yard you're looking at. You can look at it and see all the soil, so the seed goes right on the soil. The dying rye is above it, aids in germination. Now we have a good crop of buckwheat. And then when we get to the end of that cycle, we're terminating the buckwheat, we're seeding into the dead buckwheat, and then we have our food plot crops. 3 crops, constant rotations. And then in our fall crops, a lot of our green blends contain tillage radish. We also have vetch in a portion of them, annual clover, a little bit of rye, peas that put nitrogen back in. And so those soil builders are in there. But you know what the best soil builder is? Those are our 3 rotations. That's one way we're building. That's putting nutrients back in different ways. But does it make sense, our fall crop, because we have 5, 6, 7 different seeds within those blends, are the worst soil builders because there's 5, 6, 7 seeds. That means you don't have one good crop affecting the soil positively across the entire landscape. Some of those are eaten down more. Depending on the year, the amount of drought or amount of rain, some might grow better than others. So some don't grow at all. Some get droughted out. Some the deer eat down to the ground. And so that period of time for our fall crops for deer is actually our lowest quality time for building the soil. And the deer eat it too. And that's why we expose the soil and we add the rye in the spring. So it's going really well during the summer, then you add that fall crop, and you want that monoculture. Well, there's no really good monoculture crop that you can plant for the fall that's going to give you a great deer herd experience, great hunting, build that herd. And we didn't buy this land to build the soil. We bought this land to build a deer hunt and to build a deer herd. We're incorporating everything else around that and making smart decisions to actually have good deer hunting and build the soil at the same time. So when we're looking at these summer blends, we're looking at our soil building activities, you want a monoculture. And this is where you follow the farming practices. You know, a farmer couldn't afford to have 3 crops, and it wouldn't make sense. A cash crop, and you can't have 3 crops. It wouldn't be economically viable, or timing, it wouldn't work either. So we're looking at, we do it this way to build the soil. It's best for food plotting. And then when it comes to farming practices, when they build the soil, whether they need organic matter in the soil, like high organic matter, they use sorghum. When they need to avoid compaction and put nitrogen and nitrogen back in the ground, they use tillage radish. When they have initial soil or farm fields and ag fields that they just created, they're using buckwheat and rye rotations. That's going back a century or more. They're using monoculture plantings to build soil. If a farmer thought it was best to put 15 seeds in a variety, 12 seeds in a variety, 8 seeds in a variety to build the soil, they would do so. They do not for a reason, because they want the soil to actually build relating to what they need it to be built by. They're focusing on nitrogen, they're focusing on nutrients putting back, they're so focusing on compaction they want to break apart. They want to put fine organic matter or they want to put organic matter back in. There's different focuses, or if they're just plain building ag fields. So we're looking at constant crop rotations. They each have their own little niche of what they're doing. We're focused on monoculture planting because we're following the farming practices, and that's best. And then finally, by not tilling and disking, we're working on that top 1 inch to 1.5 inches of the soil, and that's it. Every time you chisel plow, you disc, and you bring 9 inches of garbage back into it, it's a bad thing. You're never working on where the plant just lives in this upper layer. Really bad too, because if you look at these ag fields, what's happened over the last 150 years and over the last decades, look at it this way. If you're constantly plowing, you're working on that top 10 inches of soil. Well, what's happening to that soil over the last 150 years? We've lost feet of soil. So as you're working on the top layer, what's happening to that top layer? It's washing away. So the soil's no better now probably than 150 years ago. In fact, there's hardly any topsoil compared to what was there 150 years ago. So we are not plowing, disking, tilling, doing anything. In fact, this is a 6th season that we've had this in Minnesota, and we have no plans. And part of the tillage radish, that's one of the reasons we have tillage radish in a lot of our green blends, is because that's helping avoid compaction. And when you have those constant rotations of rye root system and buckwheat root system, it's helping avoid compaction too. So we're really breaking that down. We don't have to worry about it, where a farmer will occasionally have to go through there with a subsoiler and break up that soil to avoid compaction. We don't have to do that. So because we're working on that top 1 inch of soil, it goes back to my UP of Michigan roots and building those first plots out of removing fir, spruce, pine, leatherleaf, tag alder, and a bunch of garbage, ferns. I was able to build those soils to within 2 to 3 years. My fertilizer recommendations, even though I could only afford to use 200 pounds per acre, went from 600 pounds per acre to 175. My pH levels went up, but that's easy with lime. The fertility levels increased by parts per million. If you want to look this up, just look up improving poor soil food plots. You'll see an article that I put out online in 2012 that was probably written for the QDMA maybe in 2008, 2006, somewhere around there. It's a really old article, almost 20 years old, but it talks about how fast can soil improve. It's a long article where I break it down, comparing plots and soil tests. And so we're looking at, because we're only improving that top 1 inch, that's where those fertility levels improved dramatically. And then because we're not plowing, disking, tilling, we're not losing soil that we're trying to build on top. Always just that 1 inch, that top 1 inch, 1.5 inch layer. And that's the beauty of no tilling. We do use chemicals. We use chemicals twice a year, but we have 3 crop rotations. And so we don't have bare soil sitting there. We're always introducing and building the soil in between our chemicals, and we're using chemicals based on the lowest hole in the bucket for what we need to use to control what weeds we have. So learn to identify your weeds, use the bare minimum of what you need. You don't need to overspray. And by taking care of the soil in and around those chemical applications, our soil is far better than if we were tilling, disking, if we're using some glamour blends with 15 different seeds. We're a seed company. We're not going to sell that garbage. We're not going to sell it to you either. Food plotting, farming is smart. Farmers are smart. It bases on money. Food plotting is dumb. A lot of food plotting in the industry is just plain dumb. And the reason I say that is because you put all this fancy marketing on a bag and say that it's going to improve your soils, and it really doesn't. I constantly go to soils where we planted this blend and it's bare soil. Weeds were allowed to crop in. Half the soil was uncovered the entire summer because it didn't grow, it droughted out, it wasn't appropriate. And that's food plotting, unfortunately. Farming, we can learn from. I think there's things that we can do in food plotting that's even better than farming, because we're in the red already anyways, and we're already out here to do the work. So it's cool to come out here and see the rye coming in right now. It's we're still in middle of April. It's cool to see the soils healing, building, and we'll have a great crop again here going into the fall and into the hunting season. Our deer will be better for it. Our hunting will be better for it. All the critters in the area, the turkeys love our rotations here. And oh, by the way, the soil, the lack of erosion, the fact that we're not drying out our soil, the fact that we're limiting weeds with what we plant and we're putting nutrients back in and working on that top inch of soil, it's all a combination. You have to look at the big picture. We do, and I hope, you know, what we do to build our soil is something you can take to your own and improve your plots and your food plotting and ultimately your hunt for this fall. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. I really want to remind you about our food plot seed company, Pure Wildlife Blends. I even have clients that don't realize we have our company, but the food plot seed blends are flying off the shelves, and that's a great thing, and that always happens this time of year. I encourage you to check out everything. Again, purewildlifeblends.com, links in the description. But at the same time, we always carry inventory. So if you are the type that puts it off to the last minute, order it in July, we'll have it. But in the meantime, check out purewildlifeblends.com. We have a lot of different seed blends, pollinator blends, wildlife blends, switchgrass, everything that you need to plant great food plots and great wildlife plantings this season.